This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the tough love that's been shown to Cyprus. A botched bailout plan last week gave the markets the jitters. They've come up with a second one this time that protects small savers but hits large bank accounts in their pocket. With us to talk about it from London, Costas Lapavitsas, author of Crisis in the Eurozone. He also teaches at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. Here with us as well, Thomas Klau of the European Council on Foreign Relations, former banker and president of Betbeze Consulting, Jean-Paul Betbeze, and Andrea D'AMBRA, member of Beppe Grillo's anti-establishment five-star movement, which we could talk about Italy at some point, but we're waiting to see whether or not they can form a government. You might be running again because you were running to be an MP. Last time around.
Maybe we will see what the.
If they can't come up with a government, you'll be back on the campaign trail. We were talking though about Cyprus before the break. The disconnect our correspondent mentioned between the deal that's been struck and how people feel on the street.
We have learned to be scared, we have learned to panic, but now we have to learn to get things more easy, calm down, and make more balanced decisions.
The decisions that were taken were harsh. It's a catastrophe. It will be a long time before things are right again.
It's a big shame what's happened, but with the way things were going, what else could they do? There was no other solution. God help us all.
All right, bit of penitence there from that woman you saw. We mentioned it in part one. Cyprus with a bloated banking sector. Turns out though, the Cypriots are not the only ones. In fact, their size of their banking sector in relations to the economy is not even number one on the list. Luxembourg, look at that, Thomas Klau, by a long shot, and Malta ahead of Cyprus as well, and France in fifth position, 4 times the size of the economy what the banking activity represents. These numbers are so big, it's kind of hard to fathom and understand. How could this be possible?
Well, it's the history of finance and the interplay between the development of finance and the state in the last 10, 15 years. And in some ways, in many ways, the essential ways, the Eurozone crisis is a continuation, of course, of the crisis that started with the subprime crisis in the US. This is one historic development. The specificity in Cyprus is that you had a hugely overinflated banking sector. But with that, you didn't have an efficiently run state. You had a state with very high public debt. You had banks which weren't managed prudently or wisely. Not only were they awash with foreign money, but the credit they extended was credit extended to Greece itself, not a safe place to invest in, as we've now seen. So you really have a combination, I've not mentioned a few other things, a combination of factors which created the perfect storm which we're now seeing and which Cyprus is now the victim of.
But Jean-Paul Betbeze, as a banker, do alarm bells go off when you see on that chart that Luxembourg has 21 times?
You are very nice because you do not have the figures from England, which is something a bit
it's not
bigger.
The Eurozone. We only showed Eurozone.
I know. And Japan, because we are in a situation where really we have a question concerning bank and the size of banks. This being said, the quality of bank is another story. Okay, so it's a question of size and a question of quality. For example, as far as France is concerned, quality is there. And size is not that huge. In Luxembourg, you have both size and quality. And this is why it is very important to have a proper regulation and a proper supervision of the banks wherever they are. And this is why, for example, I really welcome the question of the union, of the banking union, to be sure that in all places things are okay.
So do you think the events of the past week weaken or strengthen that push towards a banking union?
Strengthen. Of course, yes. Strengthen. And what happened, for example, in the Bank of Greece, the Bank of Cyprus, the same, they were refounding, companies which were not necessarily very strong. So everyone was, let us say, nice. And when you are nice in good times, you always know that it will not last. And when times get sour, the difficult. It is harsh, and what happened is that the country in this the people in the country are paying, years and years and years in which people and globally the system of surveillance was not there, and this is late. This is dear. This is this is harsh. But this is a pure consequence of what you have in all places. In all places, we have to be concerned about the quality of the banking system in all countries.
Costas Lapavitsas, do you agree that the wake-up call we've just had on the imbalances of finance within the Eurozone strengthens that argument towards making a banking union, towards more cooperation?
It's completely the opposite. Instead of seeing a serious move towards what might be called the banking union, instead of seeing that, we've seen an ad hoc, country-specific treatment of its banking system. We've seen an avoidance of extending help to the banks on a European basis. We've seen the imposition of taxes on deposits and the undermining of trust in deposits. We've seen, in other words, a decisive move towards the further fragmentation of the European banking system, which is the key weakness of the Eurozone. It's the opposite. Germany doesn't want a unified banking supervision and a unified European system, and that's what you see in Cyprus. But if I could add a couple of more points on the Cypriot situation, just to get it clear, the Cypriot state is not particularly badly run. On the contrary, public debt in Cyprus was about 60% of GDP until 2-3 years ago. Public debt began to increase because of the recession and then because of the banks. The Cypriot state still has a rather low proportion of public debt to GDP. It's only just above 80%. It's perfectly manageable. The reason why Cyprus has been out of the international markets is the banks. It's because of the fear of the banks. So it's the failure of the private banking system of Cyprus that is at the heart of it, not the failure of the state. Now, when a private banking system fails, as it has done in Cyprus and as it has done in many, many other countries in Europe, my view is not at all to mollycoddle it. On the opposite, on the contrary, my view is to punish the private banking system that has failed, not to pull the country with it. What Cyprus needs is actually, indeed, to deal with these two huge failed banks, isolate them, put them under public ownership, clean them up, but protect the rest of the economy. Cyprus has got a lot of cooperative banks which are doing just fine. Not the whole of the system is bad. So that's what Cyprus needs. It doesn't need to increase its public debt. It doesn't need to go under austerity. It doesn't need what the Troika is giving it, because what the Troika is giving it is the kiss of death, basically.
Do you agree, Thomas Klau, that, again, this issue of not just putting a ring fence around small savings, but putting a ring fence around the whole of Cyprus's economy?
Well, I would say two things to that. Firstly, of course, the problem was crystallized in the private banking sector. But I would still not only imagine. I think it's a fact that there is, if you like, that of course the Cypriot political class cooperated, colluded, made possible, bet on the collectively and politically on the expansion of the Cypriot banking sector. And the other thing is, it's very nice to ring fence and isolate, but who'll pay for it? And to say, this should be taxpayers in the countries which haven't let such problems accumulate, I think is not leave aside the moral hazard. It's not a politically fair and feasible way to deal with a situation like the one that has emerged.
All right, let's look at a couple of reactions. First, those of people who watch the economy. Does the deal strengthen or weaken the Eurozone? Before the ink was dry, Simon Nixon in the Wall Street Journal had written that both Cyprus and Europe are worse off than 1 week ago. Controls on how much you can take out of the bank, a watershed moment for Europe. The introduction of capital controls would undermine the very fabric of the monetary union. Effectively, it means a euro in Cyprus is not a euro anymore, says Guntram Wolf of the think tank Bruegel. How much those capital controls, we don't really know yet because the details haven't come out at this point. For his part, Nobel economics laureate Paul Krugman in the New York Times says it's positive if it means a rethink of the way huge amounts of money can swarm a tiny nation like Cyprus and then suddenly pull out. He says the truth, hard as it may be for ideologues to accept, is that unrestricted movement of capital is looking more and more like a failed experiment. Jean-Paul Betbeze.
Well, I have no opposition to someone who is a Nobel Prize. I want to go back to what our colleague is saying in London, and I am not okay with what he said. We have a global disease, okay, which is crisis over banks and all this, how to cure this, okay? But of course, in each place, you do not have the same, the same crisis of same element. For example, you have in Spain a bubble in real estate. You have something of this kind in
So do we have to keep tighter controls on how much money goes in and out?
No. This is why you have to have a solution which is adapted to the country. Okay, and it has nothing to do with a fragmentation. You merely have a global disease, and of course, country per country, you have to organize your own solution. Okay, what is specific in Cyprus is the expansion of the banking system plus the presence of foreign capital. It has nothing to do with Portugal, Ireland, and Spain and something like that. So you have to organize your own recipe.
Perhaps there are parallels to Iceland.
It is Iceland, and the solution is a bit more Icelandic solution. Okay, they have to do with a sort of to adapt the solution. And second, we are in emergency. Okay, emergency is for we have a country which is really in an emergency. Afterwards, this country has to leave the hospital. Where is it going to? What kind of strategy? And this is the main issue. This is not banks. This is industry. This is tourism. What are we supposed to do? And the true way to help this country is to help this country to have a sort of political, idea concerning a global industrial strategy. What are you supposed to do?
All right, so
and this is important. This is
Costas,
far beyond banks.
Costas,
I
Lapavitsas.
fully agree. We need more Iceland, more of the Icelandic solution. That's not what we're getting. We need to let these two large banks go to the wall. We need to cleanse them, but we need to protect the domestic economy, which is what Iceland did. Iceland passed the burden on to foreign creditors. It protected the domestic deposit holders. It protected the domestic economy, and because it was outside the euro, it allowed its currency to decline, and therefore it recovered. That's not what Cyprus is getting. Cyprus is getting an attack on its depositors. Therefore, the banking system is being crushed. But at the same time,
how many of those depositors who have more than 100,000 euros in the bank are from Cyprus?
You'd be surprised how many people are from Cyprus, and how all this talk about Russian oligarchs, it just isn't true. There's going to be a lot of businesses from Greece and from Cyprus, a lot of smallholders, a lot of people who put their savings in these banks who will be ruined. That's what's going to happen. And that is really the truth of it. All this talk of a few shady Russian oligarchs getting their noses wrung, that is only probably a small part of the story. What Cyprus needs is definitely to impose the losses on some of these people who invested in a big way in these banks, but it needs to protect the domestic economy. It needs to protect the small depositors, and that's not what's happening. And as for Europe, the argument about a banking union that isn't an argument about avoiding an adaptation of the cure per country, of course, but it's having a common principle, and the principle says that when the banking system of a member country of the European Monetary Union is in trouble, you need a system of bank sorting out. You need a system that will allow the banks to find health. That is a European system. We're not getting that. Not at all. On the contrary, we're getting as far away from that as we could possibly be, and the reason is Germany doesn't want it.
Before we go, I want to talk about the way the story has been spun in the media. There's been a lot of focus on Berlin. All eyes have been on the Germans the past week. Its partners have also, though, been echoing the fundamental message.
It's a casino economy that was on the brink of collapse, and something had to be done, because otherwise it would be you, me, us who would end up paying the bill.
In my view, Cypriot President Anastasiades came to understand this week that it was not just Germany and the IMF that wanted a bail-in, but also the others.
Andrea D'AMBRA, has Germany been perhaps unfairly pegged as the bad guy in this?
I think that lately what we are seeing that Germany is just thinks to their interests. And in this European crisis, with the Eurozone that is facing to recession, comparing to the rest of the world, Germany is the only one or one of the few countries that is facing to growth and facing no problem. So we cannot think like that. I think the European Union and the idea of the Europe, anyway, that I have, should not be like that. Should be with more solidarity and not just just thinking about the German interest. We should facing the problems together and try to find a solution, global solution, European solution, not just everyone thinking about their
thinking
own
about
interests.
themselves. Thomas Klau, in the past week, we've heard a lot of people complain saying the reason this solution has come about is because Germany is strong and Cyprus is weak.
And you see, it's striking that you see the French finance minister, Pierre Moscovici, laying into Cyprus, saying it's a casino economy, using very violent language, and no one even picks up on it. And you have an editorial, not an editorial, an op-ed in El País, which has been pulled since on the website, comparing Merkel to Hitler. I think what we're seeing is the price that Germany and collectively Europe pays for the absence of an electable and ejectable government for the European Union or the Eurozone. These are the kind of decisions that would have to should be taken by a constituted political authority that is answerable either directly to the people or to a political majority in Parliament, and that takes political decisions based on a popular vote of people having voted for these people to be in power, and after 4 or 5 years, or whatever the limit is, to be in a position to vote them out of power. We don't have that in Brussels. The instruments of government, the bodies that make the decisions, are obscure, invisible, opaque. It's the invisible hand of Brussels government. People sense that this is not where the real power lies. They don't understand it, so they look, where is identifiable power? Right now, today in Europe, that's Berlin. And so the anger gets directed against Berlin now. Berlin is the worst possible capital for historical reasons, to be seen as the locus of authority over other peoples and other nations. This is bad for Germany, bad for Europe, and it needs to change. And the only possible answer, in my view, is, build a government for the Eurozone, or the EU as a whole, if Britain wants, probably won't, which is, again, electable and ejectable. The Eurozone needs government, complete with budget, taxes, the whole shebang. That's the price of monetary union. And accountability. And it's, of course, a discussion we'll continue to have in the run-up to the German elections in the fall. I want to thank you, Thomas Klau, for being with us. I also want to thank Andrea D'AMBRA, Jean-Paul Betbeze, and Costas Lapavitsas for joining us from London. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.